Today, we're diving into something pretty unique, actually. It's called the Album Quest. Basically, it's one person's mission, a really ambitious project to try and crown the best album of all time, based on their own specific criteria, of course.
That's right. And what we're looking at is the system behind it. Greensterox's personal World Cup of music. The method is, well, pretty systematic and honestly brutal. 4 albums get thrown together randomly in a group. Multiple listens are required, then ranked. First, second, third, fourth. Only the top 2 make it through. It forces really quick, decisive judgments. And, that often leads to some surprising results and pretty strong critical takes.
Yeah, definitely. So our mission today is pretty clear, but it's also a bit tricky. We're unpacking round 1, group 207. We've got the full review in front of us, all the specific arguments, the final rankings. We need to really dissect the criteria,
Right.
try to figure out why certain albums got rewarded and the others just got knocked out so fast. Okay, let's lay out the contenders then. For Group 207, we had Beautiful Trauma by Pink, Wonderful by The Killers, Genesis's collection, and Less Greatest Hits by Army of Lovers. And the result that immediately jumps out, the one that kind of makes you go, is that the Genesis compilation, a promotional disc, just sailed through as the winner. So the big question is, how on earth does a collection of old tracks basically beat not just a big contemporary rock album from The Killers, but also 2 huge global pop acts? Okay, let's get into this. Right, this is a result that makes you immediately question things, maybe bias, or at least a very particular way of weighing things up. Genesis's collection didn't just squeak by. The review calls it the easy group winner. First place, no sweat. So this really forces the first big question for this whole album quest. What actually counts as an album in this competition?
That really is the absolute crux of it here. And the source material, the review, it's refreshingly honest about what this winning album is. The reviewer flat out states collection is not a real Genesis album. It wasn't meant as a single artistic statement. It was a promotional thing, a free CD given away with the Daily Mail newspaper, of all things.
And that difference, promotional compilation versus a deliberate artistic studio album, that's fundamental if we want to understand the logic of this album quest. Usually when you search for the best album, you're thinking about the composition, the flow, the themes, the sound design for that specific release. This Genesis thing is, well, the complete opposite of that idea.
And yet it won. So we have to look at what the reviewer called its Frankensteinish makeup. Its composition is spelled out pretty clearly. Half the tracks are lifted straight from their 2007 live album, Live Over Europe 2007. And the other half, it's a mix of new studio mixes and single edits from different points in their past.
Okay, so you've got live stuff from the 2000s right next to studio tracks from the 80s, possibly remixed or shortened for, radio play. On paper, that sounds like, well, a bit of a mess, right? Different production styles, different sound quality, all mashed together.
But this is where the curation, or maybe just the sheer quality of the songs chosen, really shines through. And it's why the reviewer found that this non-album works quite brilliantly. This result tells us immediately that the reviewer, Greensterox, is prioritizing the immediate listening experience. High-quality hits, great song selection, maybe good sequencing. Over any kind of purist idea about what an album should be. Conceptual unity, consistent sound engineering, apparently not as important.
It's basically a guaranteed pleasure delivery system, isn't it? It skips the deep cuts, the maybe more challenging instrumental bits that need a bit more listener effort, and just gives you the absolute bangers, the most expertly crafted songs Genesis put out across the different eras. It's like the ultimate pre-made playlist.
And crucially, the track selection seems quite calculated. It tries to appeal to the 2 main, and often quite separate, groups of Genesis fans. The reviewer specifically points out the strength of the tracks aimed at the more casual listener, the Collins-led radio-friendly hits.
Right, so that's the polished, catchy stuff from the mid to late 80s that made them absolutely massive worldwide. We're talking about the slick pop of Abacab, the energy of Turn It On Again, and that undeniable, perfectly produced 86 hit, Invisible Touch. These are super accessible, brilliantly written pop songs designed for instant impact.
But the compilation didn't just win because of pop hits. The reviewer also notes it satisfies the purist Genesis fans. It includes some serious prog rock moments, too, showing appreciation for the earlier Peter Gabriel era, the more complex stuff.
Yeah, and that's where the contrast gets really interesting. Alongside those tight 80s pop songs, you get longer, more story-driven pieces. Stuff like The Cinema Show and what the reviewer calls a fantastic live rendition of Home by the Sea. I mean, imagine jumping from the slick gated drums of Invisible Touch straight into the sprawling keyboard-heavy narrative of The Cinema Show. You'd think it would be jarring, but apparently the reviewer loved it.
The coherence seems to come from the quality of the songs, not a shared concept or sound. If what you want is just immediate high-quality, varied listening that shows off the range of an incredibly talented band spanning different decades, different frontmen, then yeah, this curated compilation just delivers maximum bang for your buck minute by minute.
Okay, I have to push back on this a bit, though, because it goes right to the heart of the album quests method and maybe what we listeners expect best album to even mean. If the goal is finding the album that gives the best, most satisfying listen in a quick group stage battle, doesn't a perfectly curated greatest hits package just have a massive, maybe unfair advantage over a single original artistic statement? It's like comparing a movie's highlight reel to the actual full-length feature.
That is exactly the core tension this result brings up. The compilation effectively skips all the risks that come with making new music. The potential for filler tracks, maybe a concept that doesn't quite land, or just running out of amazing ideas by track 10. This Genesis collection is like a guaranteed A-list track list from start to finish. And in this group, the sheer quality just overwhelmed everything else. The reviewer called it cracking stuff, and in this context, an easy group winner. The quest methodology, by focusing on that immediate, dense quality, seems to reward looking back and curating, rather than taking a risk on something new.
Okay, so a key takeaway before we move on. This quest values immediate sonic satisfaction and guaranteed hits over conceptual purity or even basic album structure. If the songs are undeniably great, the packaging doesn't seem to matter much.
Yeah.
Right, let's shift to the second qualifier, Wonderful by the Killers. It got that crucial second spot, yeah. It comfortably beat the albums below it, but reading the review, it doesn't exactly feel like a victory lap, more like it just did enough to get through.
Yeah.
It seems like the album was competent, sure, but maybe didn't reach the heights you'd expect from a band like the Killers.
Yeah, this is a classic example of an album doing well enough structurally within the group, better than third and fourth place, but really failing the critical test of originality and maybe ambition. Greenstock's reviewer makes that pretty clear right away, saying the album definitely isn't a wonderful album. That's a direct quote, and pretty damning.
And here's where the review gets really specific and really interesting, the main criticism. Trying too hard to be U2, the reviewer actually draws a direct line to U2's 1984 album, The Unforgettable Fire.
Now, that comparison is really loaded. The Unforgettable Fire was a big turning point for U2. They moved away from the sort of anthemic rock towards something more atmospheric, more ambient, and more abstract, kind of spiritual even. Brian Eno's production was key there. So when the reviewer says they listened to the Killers' opening track and subconsciously started singing the U2 song, A Sort of Homecoming, well, that signals a serious lack of distinct identity for the Killers on this record.
Wow, that's a deep critique. It's not just saying it sounds a bit like U2, it's saying they copied the specific atmospheric vibe of U2's mid-'80s experimental phase, basically failing to carve out their own sound.
But to be fair, the reviewer adds some important context here. They acknowledge the Killers' history. They specifically mention that the band has got away with uncanny similarities with U2 before, pointing to their album Sam's Town. And the crucial difference back then, in the reviewer's very blunt words, Sam's Town was bloody marvelous.
Ah, okay, so the rule seems to be, copying is okay if what you produce is so amazing that it stands on its own, even with the borrowed style. But if you copy and the result is just, all right, or worse, kind of slow and meandering, then you get slammed for not being original. Is that a fair way to judge, though? Seems incredibly subjective deciding if the copy is good enough before deciding if copying itself is acceptable.
It really highlights the reviewer's focus on execution above all else, I think. Wonderful gets criticized for treading a dangerous line of languor. That's a critique about pacing, about substance. It suggests the music is sacrificing energy and drive for atmosphere.
What does that languor actually mean in musical terms? Like, are we talking long, drawn-out intros, synths that just kind of shimmer but never build to a big chorus?
Pretty much, yeah. The reviewer says the songs sound great. The production is good. It's all very polished, hi-fi structures. But the actual songwriting underneath isn't actually that special. So languor here probably means relying too much on that sonic texture, the atmosphere, to cover up maybe a lack of strong melodies or lyrical depth. It's like a slow-motion scene in a movie that just goes on too long. Looks nice, but the story isn't moving forward.
But despite all that, the album did have moments strong enough to get it into second place. We should probably highlight what worked.
Absolutely. The Man gets singled out, called easily the best song on the record. It's praised for being contemporary commercial rock pop that struts and swaggers. It has that confidence, that directness, the memorable hook that apparently the rest of the album kind of lacks.
Okay, and there was another specific highlight mention.
Yes, The Calling. That one was praised specifically for its gorgeous bass hook, which shows that, despite the overall atmospheric vibe, when they focused on a really punchy specific musical element, it landed.
Right. And conversely, that languor shows up in the clunky moments. The review points out inconsistencies like the chorus of Tyson V's Douglas is called occasionally captivating, which isn't exactly glowing praise, and then they just dismiss most of Rut as clunky. It suggests the quality wasn't sustained. The momentum from the good tracks just gets lost.
Exactly. It's like peaks and valleys, but maybe not enough peaks to make it truly wonderful, wonderful.
Now, here's a really interesting point for the whole methodology. The reviewer actually admits the album has, admittedly, grown on me over the weeks I've listened to it. It suggests the album gets better with repeated listens. So, what does that mean for a system like the Album Quest, which relies on quick judgments after just a few listens?
It means albums that are growers, albums that need time to unfold and be appreciated, are at a real disadvantage. If the Quest demands a quick verdict, an album like Wonderful Wonderful might just scrape through based on its immediate highlights and slick production. But it's never going to seriously challenge something like that Genesis compilation, which delivered instant gratification. That lingering feeling the reviewer mentioned, the slight disappointment, that's the key hurdle it couldn't quite clear in this first round, even though it advanced.
So basically, good enough execution on its best songs, even with major flaws and borrowing styles, was just enough to push it into round two. But only just. Okay, now let's look at the albums that didn't make the cut, starting with third place. Less Greatest Hits by Army of Lovers. This one sounds like the reviewer actually quite liked it, but it still ended up just behind the Killers.
Yeah, this was clearly the fight for that second qualifying spot, and it sounds like it was close. But the Army of Lovers compilation just couldn't quite levitate, as the review put it, into second place, even though it was apparently a lot of fun.
The review describes it really vividly, calls it wall-to-wall, trashy Europop. That's a specific flavor. But it also tempers that by mentioning an occasionally sprinkling of humanistic poetry. Interesting combo.
That mix is really key to understanding Army of Lovers, I think. They were all about being provocative and entertaining. Their whole thing was like really overt things about sexuality, liberalism, pushing boundaries, especially for the early 90s. And all of this was set to super high-energy, catchy electro-pop music. The reviewer even compared their style, mixing ideas with dance beats, to the classic Pet Shop Boys.
So the overall vibe, according to the review, is a fun, inclusive musical experience, described as a bit different, a bit weird, and a bit cosmopolitan.
Right.
They weren't aiming for high art, maybe, but they really nailed their particular brand of over-the-top theatrical pop.
And their main period of success, like 91 to 95, it produced a bunch of genuinely fun pop hits. These were big on the European dance charts, songs like Supernatural, the really energetic Ride the Bullet, Obsession, and their biggest international hit, Crucified. These are just pure, distilled pop songs, well-structured, unapologetically dramatic, designed to be entertaining.
So the conflict here seems to be about how you weigh pure fun against perceived artistic depth or maybe sonic sophistication. And the reviewer clearly had a strong connection to one track in particular. They called it the epic standout.
Oh, yeah. The reviewer's absolute favorite track, the one that almost got the album into second place, was Sexual Revelation. Described as a ridiculously overblown carnival anthem to celebrate sex in all its forms, the reviewer just says straight up, it's epic. And that track really sums up their whole aesthetic. Big, theatrical, highly produced, and thematically really bold.
Okay, but here's the fascinating methodological puzzle again. A track described as ridiculously overblown and epic, clearly a personal favorite, was still, sadly, not quite enough to lift this album above the Killers. Why not? What did the Killers have that this didn't, even with its flaws?
Consistency, I think. The Album Quest seems to prioritize consistent execution across the whole album. Army of Lovers offers massive fun, bold statements, and that one epic track. But the overall sound quality, the consistent production level, that high-fidelity structure we talked about with the Killers, that was likely deemed higher overall, even if the Killers album felt a bit disappointing or derivative. The sheer competence and structural solidity of the second-place album just edged out the passion and standout moments of the third-place one. Fun, it seems, is worth less than competence in this particular contest structure.
Which brings us, finally, to the bottom of the heap. Fourth place, Pink's Beautiful Trauma. This one didn't just lose, it got absolutely demolished in the review. It wasn't even close.
Yeah, the critique here is brutal, mainly because it's so simple and final. The album gets summed up with three uh, pretty harsh four-letter words: dull, drab, and dire. There's no room for interpretation there. It's a fundamental failure to engage the listener.
And to really understand the trauma of this result, you have to know the reviewer's background with the artist. The review explicitly says, "I'm a big fan of Pink, who has created some sensationally good albums in the past." So this wasn't someone who already disliked her. This was a fan expressing deep, profound disappointment, almost like a critical betrayal.
And the main reasons for the failure, according to the review, seem to be twofold. First, a real lack of creativity. The album feels short on ideas. And second, because of that lack of ideas, it ends up just retreading old ground badly. So it's not just failing to innovate. It's actually making her own past work look worse by trying to copy it without the original energy or quality.
Wow. And even the big collaboration, the one with Eminem, couldn't rescue it. That must have seemed like a guaranteed highlight on paper. Revenge, right?
Yeah.
Pairing those two huge personalities, known for being pretty explosive.
Yeah, it had the potential to be great, the reviewer says. But again, it failed the execution test for the quest. The track just felt rushed. And thinking about what rush might mean, maybe the production felt thin, the lyrics didn't quite connect, the back and forth wasn't sharp enough. Whatever it was, it felt like a missed opportunity and kind of symptomatic of the whole album's problems.
And beyond that track, the album is pretty much dismissed as a sea of lusterless mediocrity. The only glimmers of hope mentioned are Secrets, What About Us, and maybe grudgingly, Where We Go. And even those are called dim highlights.
So the big takeaway for Pink here is stark. The failure came down to a lack of originality and just not enough discernible effort. And that translated directly into mediocrity. Her reputation, her past successes, none of that mattered. In the harsh, performance-focused world of the album quest, dull, drab, and dire are basically instant disqualifiers. You have to bring fresh ideas or execute brilliantly, otherwise you're out.
Okay, so we've seen a pretty dramatic, maybe even brutal outcome for Group 207. Let's quickly recap the final rankings just to synthesize what we've learned. First place, Genesis Collection. Second, The Killer's Wonderful, Wonderful. Third, Army of Lovers' Less Greatest Hits. And fourth, Pink, Beautiful Trauma.